lights close the tired eye. I'll soon be with you, my love. Give you my dawn surprise. I'll be with you, darling, soon. I'll be with you when the stars start falling. I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going, in the sunshine of your love. I'm with you, my love, the light shining through on you. Yes, I'm with you, my love. It's the morning and just we two. I'll stay with you, darling, now. I'll stay with you till my seas are dried up. I've been waiting so long to be where I'm going, in the sunshine of your love. I'm with you, my love, the light shining through on you. Yes, I'm with you, my love. It's the morning and just we two. I'll stay with you, darling, now. I'll stay with you till my seas are dried up. I've been waiting so long. I've been waiting so long. I've been waiting so long. Where I'm going, in the sunshine of your love. Hey, little girl. Well, now don't you know that I dig you so? Yes, and I just love to teach you everything that I know. And don't you know it's not easy for me to talk this way? But I just have to say, please don't let your good sweet dreams sink under the waves. There are still a lot of people living here on this earth who know your worth. Yes, and they stay alive just for your magic. And don't you know that mysteries, yes, are oh so real. They're nothing to and it just might grow on you. You don't have to live your life wearing other people's dirty clothes. No, nor take their blows. You know something, baby? They're not half as ready as you are. So hey, hey girl, well now don't you know that I did you so? Yes, and I just love to teach you everything that I know, everything.
Good evening. I'm Mary Cutler. Coincidentally, I am the general manager here at Town Hall Seattle. I have worked here for about 12 years, and thank you. Let me tell you, it is a funny collision of events happening for me here this evening. That is, in fact, not why I'm here. I'm here to introduce the speakers, but I have to just say how happy I am to see all of you in person in this room after all this time. I've been wandering around like, what is this place? It's magical and beautiful, and it's full of people. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. And especially, not especially, equally, I want to welcome all our folks who are watching the live stream, especially those people on the East Coast who may or may not be staying up a little late to watch this. This is an especially important night for me and my family, as my husband Josh is one of the presenters, and his book shares a part of our lives that we don't typically talk about much, or didn't until he wrote a book about it. Just a little housekeeping. We're going to have a brief intermission at 6:45. If you have any questions, please jot them down. I think they have note cards, or if you're watching the live stream, I think you can put questions in the YouTube chat. And if you have a question after intermission, I guess I don't know what to tell you because they're only accepting them before intermission. And then as well, please notice that we have the book available for purchase in that corner, both versions of the book, and some beautiful shirts and other merch from Head and Heart in this corner. So please do see us afterwards. The program tonight is presented by Head and Heart, an organization focused on using compassion as a path to change the world. I have been to the lovely Head and Heart space in Winthrop, Washington, where I remember last winter, after we had been cooped up for months, Ellen graciously led us and our daughters through an impromptu yoga class in her studio. Josh Cutler, in addition to being my husband of 15 years, is a Seattle area-based author, social worker, and psychotherapist. He has held clinical and leadership positions in nonprofit healthcare for the last 15 or so years. His memoir, The Day Hospital, cuts to the core of human struggle and reminds us all that mental illness does not discriminate. And Ellen Slater is the founder of Head and Heart, an online and physical space based in Winthrop that offers therapy, yoga, workshops, and continuing education. She has held positions in community mental health, hospitals, and private practice, and completed an interdisciplinary fellowship at the Seattle VA. Ellen couples scientific research with ancient wisdom to support others in living a full, values-based life. Ellen has become a dear friend to me and Josh and our girls, and I'm so glad you're all able to share this special evening with us. This event has been a long time coming. Ask me how I felt about it a year and a half ago. Please join me in welcoming Josh Cutler and Ellen Slater to the Town Hall stage.
Welcome.
We made it.
We did.
And you all did too.
Thank you, Mary. So here we are. Thank you for joining us for an event on vulnerability. First, I want to just lead with the fact that being in attendance is an act of vulnerability, right? To acknowledge and see mental health as something worthy to spend time on and show up for it. Even that alone is an act of vulnerability. So thank you. And Josh, thank you for inviting me to hold space for this incredibly powerful story you have. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Josh and I met in Pioneer Square. He was renting space. I had an office and he was renting space. So we were sort of passing ships, but we were in the same container, right? So that I was also offering therapy. And if I recall, I somewhat recommended that maybe you want to pull out the yoga mat or use the chime. And you were...
I was like, no, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be doing CBT in here. And by the end, I was using the chime. And this last weekend, I went to a yoga retreat with Ellen. I was the only guy, and I had a great time. So...
So the chime follows us. We'll do a little arriving practice, and just drop into our breath, and a lot of what we talk about tonight is going to be mindfulness-based. And so whether you've practiced before or whether you're new to it, you can't do it wrong. But I'm just going to invite us to practice. So if, for those of you live streaming, I invite you to join in. So you just find a comfortable seat wherever you are, and if you are at home, finding a shape in your body that feels good to you. And if you're open to it, to gently close your eyes, or you can just rest your gaze. And find your breath. Sometimes we lose track of it. And so I just invite you to notice that your body is breathing. You don't have to do anything to it right away. You're just like, oh, there's my breath. And then if it feels good to you, you might deepen your inhale, just a big inhale. And then I just invite you to pour your exhale out of you like water from a tea kettle. You might extend the exhale a little bit longer. Beautiful. And then I just invite you to notice, where do I feel my breath most strongly? Is it the rise and fall of my chest? The ribs expanding or deflating? I feel it sometimes as cold air entering my nostrils. But just where do you feel your breath most strongly? And wherever you feel it most strongly, just sort of rest awareness there. The breath continues to move, but there's this sense of like a little anchor at the spot you feel it most strongly. And on your exhale, I just invite you to soften your shoulders, lean back into your skull, lean back into the backside of your body. We're so front focused, right? Moving forward, on to the next thing, tasks. Lean back, be in your body, arriving in this seat. On the inhale, I invite you to note, I have arrived. On the exhale, I am here. Inhaling, I have arrived. Exhaling, I am here. Letting go of the day. Carving out some space to just be in your body. Here together. Beautiful, and staying with your breath and breathing through the end of the chime. Lovely, and wiggling your toes and gently blinking your eyes open as you're ready. And more of us is here now. Welcome. So Josh, I think it'd be nice to just give a little foundation for our conversation tonight. So we're going to be talking about, as the title indicates, modern mental health. I think just noting what we mean by that. And, you know, interestingly enough, research is catching up, but ancient wisdom often informs us. And so a mindfulness metaphor might be really helpful. And we've talked about this a little bit in preparation, but modern mental health I see as a nice metaphor, imagining that you're on a beach, just a long stretch of sand. And when you approach the water, your feet kind of feel into the sand, and like you kind of sink down, and you know how the sand kind of curls over your feet. And there's like a little anchoring feeling there, if you can just imagine that, just using your imagination. And then the water being emotions, right? And some are wild and crazy and crash, and some are just like nice little lapping. but that as best we can, we watch them and observe them. But we all have emotions. So sometimes some corners of the beach can have a riptide, right? They can be a little bit of rougher waters. And so sometimes we might use words tonight like anxiety and depression or mental illness. And so to broaden this to very common human experiences that we all have waves. It just depends on what your waves look like. And the complexity of what impacts us, just as the waves, the sun, the moon. My son's doing a little stint on the moon right now, and recently he was like, "Did you know that the moon makes waves?" I was like, "It does?" And he goes, "I think so." And I'm like, "That's so sweet." And so just remembering how wild this all is, right? There's the sun, there's wind, and it all is impacting us. And so as we talk tonight, we're going to talk about some hard things, and as best we can, we want to witness our emotions and anchor into the beach. And so that's just setting the tone, right, tonight, and have something to come back to, an anchor.
Thank you, Ellen.
Yeah.
Tonight is an opportunity for me to tell some stories that I don't often talk about in public. Those of you that have read my book, and I've had conversations with some of you that you were surprised about some of the things that I've experienced. And going with the ocean metaphor, I especially have come to appreciate after being a therapist for over 10 years that often you can't really imagine what's going on for people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I used to work in a clinic for Swedish just up the street in primary care, and a lot of folks from the financial district or attorneys or physicians or people working in our health system would come in, and they'd come in looking like they had it all together. And I'd even see them in the lobby, and then the doctor would come grab me and say, "This person really needs some help." And it was really eye-opening to me, just of the wide range of human experiences that are experiencing a lot of struggle. And it also, I think, helped me with my own experience to recognize this is more normal than I appreciate. When for many years I felt pretty isolated and frankly, a lot of shame around kind of what I'd been through around my own mental health. And so this event tonight is a huge opportunity for vulnerability for me. I'm trying to practice what I preach. And Ellen is frankly the best therapist I know. And I asked her to do this event with me because I knew that she could hold the space and support me to be able to share this stuff and create a container for us to have this conversation that isn't just about me, it's about what we're all experiencing as humans. But I'm really glad that you all joined us, those here and those at home.
Thank you, Josh. That's kind. And also brave. I mean, so brave. And what you're talking about, right, is the stigma. And that's a huge piece of tonight. And just in general, we demystifying and destigmatizing this. I mean, it's so easy. You mentioned everybody has a story, right? And we forget that. And we can begin forming othering, right? Oh, they have it all together. Or, oh, they have it. This image or this facade that we put on, right? And it's alienating, and yet we're all in it, and we're all doing it. And so to be open about our mental health and be vulnerable, it's brave, and there's a time and a place for it, right? And that's a bit of what we want to talk about tonight too, is choosing when, choosing who you share with and setting the container, knowing who is there to receive. And also being able to be emotionally literate to know when you do need support, right? And I don't know for you but for me, emotional literacy began mostly through music. How often have you heard a song and the lyrics and the rhythm? For me, the main entry was bluegrass, but just, wow, hearing the emotion and the willingness to tell these stories. It was in lay life, whatever, in common life, we're not really talking about this, and at least for us growing up, and many times it's not in schools, right? This is the emotional experience. It's like a wave. It will pass. Don't worry. It's more like, uh-oh, what are we going to do about it? We better not feel this way. I'm curious if that's been somewhat of your experience in your journey of better get rid of this.
Mm-hmm.
Can't ask for help.
Yeah, yeah. And certainly in my early experiences with more serious clinical depression and in college, that was something that was a real struggle. And my mom is here. I actually really want to thank her for taking me to the doctor that first time when I was really in a dark place, and I think it saved my life. And the people in your life that are close to you are so important and precious, and keep them close.
Yeah.
So.
Would you be open to reading a little bit about that?
Yeah,
about,
sure.
Just that willingness to ask for help? Oh, a line you used earlier, I had mentioned when we were preparing, I was like, man, what courage tonight, particularly, right? We're all holding space. And you were like, no, I was terrified. And then you quickly were like, well, I guess you can't have courage if you're not scared. So.
All right. So this is around when I was 21, and I was on the brink of leaving college, I think, for the second time, and I had an appointment with my first ever psychiatrist. And it's interesting, these days I work in behavioral health, so I'm friends with a bunch of psychiatrists, but I think this is the first psychiatrist I'd ever met. So I hated my first psychiatrist before I even met him. He represented what I had been taught to question. Emotional problems were to be dealt with by talking and love and romance and meditation and vitamins and diet and pursuing your dreams and finding your passions and higher education and working harder and vacations, not psychiatrists and their cabinets full of poison tablets and half-truths about the human mind. I was a skeptic, to say the least, when I first darkened Dr. C's door. But I was desperate. I wanted to die. I had tried to die and failed more than once. And part of me wanted to live. There was still a little bit of hope. I stepped off the city bus into a gray, rainy Seattle day, underdressed in a hoodie and tennis shoes. I was soaked before I made it across the sidewalk. I checked the address that my dad had scribbled on an old envelope, feeling uncertain as this looked like a residential street. But the numbers matched what was on my paper. I stepped onto the porch. Next to the door was a sign with names followed by MD, PhD, PsyD, LMHC, and LICSW. It wasn't until much later in life that I could easily translate this alphabet soup. Dr. C, MD, psychiatry. This was the place. I stepped out of the miserable, soggy day, not unlike how I felt inside, into a nicely appointed waiting room. I've learned in my life that bravery and courage are not about the absence of fear, but the acceptance of doing something that is necessary despite the terror it evokes and emotional or physical risk it could lead to. It is worth facing the pain because it is important. You also may not have any other choice. Out of options, all roads had led me here. There was no escaping this appointment, this meeting with destiny, but not the kind of destiny you imagine with love or vocation. It is the hard stuff that is part of your life, no matter what. I have come to understand that this is my inheritance. This meeting with my psychiatrist was not dissimilar to being summoned to an estate attorney's office to learn that you have inherited great wealth from a long-lost uncle or estranged father. Except this inheritance wouldn't buy me houses or cars or happiness. The genetics of mental illness remain complicated and mysterious. But one thing is very clear. It is passed on from one generation to the next. And there's a photo back by my books in the back that's of me when I was about that age. So if you see a younger version of me, that's why I brought it.
Nice. So just inviting us all to notice if anything's arising in the body. Just finding your breath. Maybe imagining the feet on the beach, just noticing if there's tension in your body or tightness, if there's memories coming up of yourself or someone you love or something painful. And just noticing that as best you can without judgment. It's both difficult to be vulnerable and difficult to receive vulnerability, to hold space for others. So just touching into your own experience. And then Josh, how are you doing? Thank you.
I'm doing good.
You got it out.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. It's really something to share that story in such a public forum.
Yeah,
so thank you all.
Yeah. Wow. What I was really struck by is so often we hear tragic endings, right? When people die by suicide, or, and if you haven't heard that, I'm happy for you. And we rarely hear the recovery, right? Rarely do you meet someone who says, yeah, I've really struggled with suicidal ideation and I'm okay right now. Or it comes and goes and right now I'm not. We hear about other recoveries, physical recoveries, maybe recoveries from cancer. And so just to hear you speaking of right now I want to live, and that just to continually decrease this fear and stigma of mental health in general, and then also of suicidality, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I've lost some people to suicide in the last few years, patients and family members and colleagues. And
Me too.
I frankly am sick of talking about it and hearing about it, and without also openly sharing, like, recovery is real. And look, I went through some stuff and I almost died, and I'm very much alive. And
That's right.
and I have two beautiful little girls that are very much alive because I went through this recovery journey.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of why. I mean, it feels like I'm putting myself at a lot of risk, just personally and professionally in some ways, to
Right.
have these stories out there. But I am not wanting to keep so quiet. And I also recognize I have a lot of privilege being a white man. I'm a professional. I'm able to be self-employed if I want to be. I'm at a place in my life where, things are pretty stable. So
Right.
it feels like, okay, if this is the time to do it, I'm going to do it. But it's also no less terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing up that piece about privilege and
Yeah.
and almost seeing that as even more of a motivation. Like, you have the luxury to share, so may you share it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And the piece you're sharing here, this piece of the reading, is asking for help, right? That first step of reaching out. And then there's many steps after that, right? We consistently need to ask for help. And one tool certainly is medication. And that's your lovely story tonight, is the willingness to say, yeah, there's a stigma. Yeah, I love that line of, like, vacations should do this, meditation, why am I not meditating more? Yoga, all of that. And just this humility that we must take with this ocean, right? It is the ocean, and there is so much more complex
Yeah.
than what we all can see, and that it is not a fault-finding act. It is not a pull yourself up by your bootstraps situation.
Yeah. And all of those things are really helpful.
Right,
And,
yeah.
and
Thank you.
And again, depending on where you're at on the spectrum, but I've also come to
Yeah.
accept that for some people, including me, medication can be helpful. And
Well, and for me, it was probably about 13 years ago, there's a practice in yoga philosophy called satya, and it's truthfulness. It's translated from Sanskrit to truthfulness. And it's this idea of being with the truth, seeing the truth, not honesty in the traditional sense or in our Western sense, but this idea of seeing and being with what is true. And so if there is a riptide or if there is tidal waves, to be with that, to be truly accepting and noticing. And a moment of satya for me was about 13 years ago when I realized for me, yoga was to me like AA is to someone in recovery. You know, with the level at which I experience anxiety and perfectionism and racing mind, that to me was an admittance, right? And so it's whatever tool is working for you, then we dedicate ourselves to it, right? Whether we want to or not, which I know is a sacrifice with medication. Yeah.
But after a weekend at your retreat center, yoga is now becoming a necessity for me too.
Gonna be in your toolbox?
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'm curious, you know, when we talk about satya, if that brings up anything for you around acceptance, right? And accepting, and this piece of this being a journey. You've used that word a lot, right? And in our left dominant world, we often think of healing as linear. Or has anybody been like, okay, when am I going to get there? When's this going to get better? Or why is this back? Like, I thought I dealt with this. And you so bravely took a break again recently, right? The title of your book, The Day Hospital, the title of his book. And this emergence of your work is coming with another experience and bout of really painful depression, and the willingness to see healing as cyclical. Will you tell us a little bit about that? What that was like to be, you know, in your stride, or at least thinking you were.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one thing to have had depression in your past, and even college was rough, but I got through it, and it continues to be one of my deepest fears that I'm going to just lose it and get really depressed and not being able to function, and because it's happened before, and so for me, trying to keep that in my past, and I was at a point where this was before COVID, but working a lot, working 2 jobs, 2 kids. My father had passed away, my grandfather had passed away, who were really anchors for me in my life in a lot of ways, and feeling very responsible for my family in a very expensive city, between childcare and housing and all the rest. It was
Hustle,
just
man.
a
Hustle.
lot of hustle, and it just started really grinding me down, and I was having a lot of amazing professional opportunities due to that hustle, and I was wanting to take advantage of them, but it got to the point where I just started having some warning signs for myself of like, whoa, I'm not doing well, and talking with my providers about it, it was like, I definitely need to take a break and get some more serious help, and so that's what I did. I went to an intensive day hospital program where you don't stay overnight, but you go all day, and you're under the care of a care team, including a psychiatrist, and so I can share a little bit about that.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
The day hospital isn't about sorting through the wreckage of the past. We will get to that later. It is about making a plan and building skills to live a good life today, in the here and now. That's exactly where I needed to bring my attention. They told me my last day in the program would be on a Tuesday. 7 days, and they were sending me home. I wasn't sure if that was what they thought I needed, or what my insurance said it would pay for. It certainly didn't feel like enough. I wasn't better. Monday morning, I was feeling scared. I didn't shave or shower. I pulled a hoodie over my unshaven face and covered my tousled hair with a ball cap. There were new people in the group that morning. Others had left last week. The ones I felt close to, the ones that were as crazy as me, but also normal enough that they were gone, replaced by strangers. It was disorienting. I felt alone. I wasn't ready to go. I didn't want to go. I was just getting in my groove here, finding a rhythm and a routine. I liked the counselors and the psychiatrist. I couldn't face my life, not how it was. I wasn't ready to go back to it. This had become a safe place for me, but now I had to leave. The pit of despair opened, and I hung my legs over the edge and peered down. That black door was open once again. I would rather die than keep living the way I had been living, struggling to be good when I was far from fine. I decided to be honest when I rated how I was feeling. Maybe I could stay longer. After I shared how I was feeling, everyone in the room avoided eye contact with the psychiatrist, who confirmed that these were just thoughts and I had no clear plan or intention to hurt myself. One of the counselors later pulled me out to talk about it. They moved on to the next person. The next day, when I said goodbye, and people said their nice thing about me, a few said that my honesty about my suicidal thoughts had been a turning point for them. They had been underreporting and struggling quietly, but my opening up about it and not being thrown right in the hospital helped them feel safer in sharing how deep their dark thoughts were. That is what I hope for these words that I am writing. That as self-shattering as these stories are, I hope that they can be of some help. By the end of the program, I felt better, stronger, clearer, that maybe I could make it. As we got up to leave after the last group, I felt a strong urge to hug the counselor and the people next to me that I had known for a few days. But this wasn't that type of place. I nodded politely and packed my bag and slipped out the door. A song that my dad had on regular rotation in the Paul Simon playlist that was on the soundtrack to my childhood slid across my mind. "Hey Siri," I yell in the direction of my iPhone, "play Gumboots." The song started playing through the speakers. The familiar acoustic guitar washes over me. I'm transported to a house in the woods where I learned how to cook and how to drive and how to live. Long before I ever knew what divorce or trauma or suicide or breakdown meant, I knew the words to this song. I imagine Paul Simon next to me, the friend he sings about in this song. Breakdowns come and breakdowns go. What are you going to do about it? That's what I want to know. The sun stretched out over the water. I drove over the bridge, leaving the day hospital one last time. Tears streamed down my face as my lips sang along to the familiar tune. I punched the accelerator, thundering over the wide floating bridge, a tingle surging through me. It was time to go home and live.
So again, just finding your body, finding your breath. Just noticing. There might be shakiness. There might be discomfort. There might be joy. There might be all of it. Finding that breath wherever you feel your breath most strongly. Again, a big piece of vulnerability is both being vulnerable and receiving vulnerability. So just holding yourself and anchoring your feet on the shore. Thank you, Josh. I'm curious, was it liberating again, or how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
How does your body feel? How does it feel to, share this?
I'm just really grateful for this opportunity to share these stories that have been in me for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. It was that sense of music right? And how soothing and connected it is. I mean, one of the terms I like to use when we're working with building resilience is resourcing. How do I resource myself? How do I find, just that, my resources, right? What keeps my feet in the sand and not in the undertow? And music, right? Such a huge one. So it's a beautiful moment you had. I can see it across the floating bridge, feeling awake and alive. And that comes and goes, right? The ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as you're sort of returning across the bridge, right? I'm curious, what are some of the main pieces that you've taken from that, right? The day hospital. Sort of what do you have in your back pocket? What's resourcing you? Day to day, even.
Well, I left that program with this blue notebook full of different exercises. We got a lot of worksheets. It was very CBT and DBT focused, if you're familiar with that. There's a lot of worksheets involved. And I like carried it around with me for like 2 months, like in my bag to work. I don't think I even opened it up more than once, if at all, but I like just had it with me. It just felt like this, I think in the book I just say something about in case I get jammed up, I've got this with me. And it just took me right back to that moment where I felt really safe and cared for. And I was at a time when I was taking care of a lot of patients. And so to really step back and be a patient, I needed that. I needed to just be taken care of. And it was a struggle at first to be like, these people could be my like colleagues or friends. Right. And they knew I was a therapist and had the same degree and license as me. And, and to be able to now I'm just here as Josh. And then a few weeks later back to, I even went through like, I don't even know if I can be a therapist anymore. And then by the end, it was like, this is actually pretty cool. I want to be like these people. And unlike many people that think they want to go be a therapist that need to go do all the school stuff, I'd already done all that. I just had to go back to work. And so I did. And I saw clients this morning, and that's what I do.
Right.
And so that was just a really interesting experience.
Yeah.
But I appreciated being able to step back. And I think it helped me also to rekindle my passion for I went to a really good program, and I felt lucky that I had good insurance that paid for that, and that I was, cared for by good folks, and there's a lot of gaps in the mental health system. A lot of people fall through the cracks, and I'm grateful that there has been resources and people in my life that have helped get me connected, and early on, my parents helped getting me connected to professionals, and now I'm pretty good at finding my own professionals.
And I imagine it's also been really powerful to you as a professional, being a professional, the humility and the connection you made to what it's like to be on both sides. And that's this idea that you and I are both really passionate about, which is there is no us and them. There is no othering. And I'm curious how you feel like that's supported your work.
Yeah, it's really helped with this sense of integration, which is what I feel like tonight is about in some ways for me. But there's a great teacher who teaches some therapy skills who talks about you're on your mountain and I'm on mine. And it's not that I'm an expert mountain climber, but from here I can see some of the things that are up ahead that maybe are going to cause you some trouble, and I've got some ideas and tools that I can give you that would be helpful on your journey, and I have a little perspective that you don't have. Beautiful. So I really like that, and of course, as a professional, I show up with boundaries and appropriately disclose, usually not a whole lot. I've been quiet about even this work with my own clients, though I'm sure people can come across my book, but it's definitely an interesting way to be putting myself out there. And
my sense for you is as you put yourself out there, the reception, like the benefit of being vulnerable, like has far outweighs, right, the risks it took.
Yeah, now.
Thank
Ask
you
me
for
tomorrow. I've got the day blocked for a vulnerability hangover. Um, and
Oh, well said.
and that's a Brene Brown term that my
Yes, it
sister
is.
Cindy reminded me. Hey, Cindy, out in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that everybody should just be telling these stories. I have a graduate degree in this, and I have been, in a lot of therapy, and also published the first edition anonymously
Yeah.
right at the beginning of COVID. Like I wrote this thing right before COVID, and then I also learned pretty quickly that it's really hard to promote an anonymous book. Who would have thought? I gave it my best try, and I put in a bunch of those little libraries, and I even got it in third place books in my neighborhood. But I got as COVID wore on, I realized I had some additional stories, so I added some additional chapters to the second edition, and I realized with what everybody was going through, I think this is a time when people are more open about their mental health, and more people are struggling with mental illness or at some level of the
Yes.
continuum than maybe
Yes.
have before.
Yeah.
In a collective way, we're talking about it, and it just felt like, who am I to keep this so
Yeah.
quiet? And I have a little bit of a platform. I just through my work, and so being able to
Yeah.
share it. And so now I've doing this. I've talked about it on podcasts. It's really. I mean, if you had told me a few years ago that I would be this open about these stories, I would have been like, "You're crazy." But it turns out that I'm being more comfortable talking about my own crazy. So
Yeah. And such a powerful time right now to be doing that.
yeah.
We all need it, so it's a service. Yeah. Well, I think we're gonna take a little break. I think you guys have hopefully been informed, but that there's a note card to just write any question you have, and we would love to answer them or get to as many as we can, and spend a little time on that after this. Anything
Yeah.
you want to say before intermission?
You can give the note cards to Chloe in the back. Oh, there she is. Chloe in the back.
Nice.
Just hand them to her, and she'll give them to us. And we probably won't be able to get to all the questions, but if you just have something you'd like us to touch on, she'll bring those to us. So if you could get those to her quickly, so we could
Yeah.
go through them. And
Our intention for doing it anonymously like this is just to feel free to ask anything that you want, and whatever feels, feels good.
And there's books for sale back there. I'll be signing books at the end.
Enjoy a little break.
Yeah.
Sweet. See you in a little bit. right, I'll bring him a little closer. Welcome back, everybody. Hi. So thank you for those of you that wrote questions. Josh, you want to start us off?
Yeah, well, and this is a deep thinking group. There was a lot of really great questions, and we'll see how many we get to. But we'll start off with, can you talk more about self-disclosure and how you see that being a tool to dismantle some of the stigma of mental health problems? Mm-hmm. So what comes up for you around that, Ellen?
It's such a good question. I mean, one piece is we are the change, right? And when you pull on one string, you pull on the whole system. So there is an element to being open with certainly those that are closest to you, and then also, think about it as like a bullseye. You've got those that are closest to you, and then you just slowly move out into the periphery, and you really be discerning as you move further out where and when you feel most safe and held on as it relates to mitigating the impact of the stigma and demystifying it and such. If we're all doing that, right, we're beginning to normalize it. We're beginning to speak openly of it. I also want to be clear that being vulnerable and self-disclosing, it needs to be for you, right, not for the other person. And so if it's going to serve, and if it feels like there's a space that's, someone might meet you there, or that it's safe, that's a nice spot. But if you are self-disclosing and you feel like you're oversharing, or you're having too much of a vulnerability hangover, or maybe that the meeting is like you're in a meeting or something and it needs to end and the other person needs to go, right, that's not going to feel good to you. And so really ensuring that you're checking in with yourself, okay, is this going to feel good afterwards? And I think in that way you can begin to discern, when do I self-disclose and how will it support others in sharing, right? I don't know, what about you?
There's a concept in the treatment of anxiety called exposure therapy, where you get some exposure to something that you're afraid of in larger and larger doses. So like if it's spiders, you might start with like a picture of a spider and then visit a spider at the zoo, and then spiders kind of creep me out, so I'm not going to keep going, but you get the idea.
That's where you stop.
And so with vulnerability, maybe starting with talking to a friend of yours that is a pretty close friend, but maybe you don't usually talk about difficult thoughts and feelings so much, especially if you're a guy. But I think that can go for all kinds of relationships. And so starting there, and maybe even at work, when someone asks you how you're doing, instead of just saying fine, like saying, well, I'm having kind of a hard day. You don't have to tell them everything that's going on, but just like, you don't have to be super happy-go-lucky all the time. And I'm an expert at putting on a happy face, and I did a lot of musical theater in high school. I know how to put on the charm. And so, but there's a real disconnect with yourself when you're doing that constantly. And so to be a little more real, it can make a really big difference. And so it's not like you just suddenly have to bust out with this book about all of the bad things that have happened in your life. Not every bad thing. This is really a selection of specific experiences for me. But I think that it's definitely something that you work up to gradually, and something you get a little bit more comfortable with. And that's something I'm just like, these are conversations. Frankly, writing this book, like what gave me the courage to put my name on it was that I gave out that anonymous copy to quite a few people, and then I got some good feedback from people, and then it gave me courage to maybe give it to a larger group from my circle. And I was having these just really deep conversations with people that I thought I knew relatively well, but I didn't know that they'd gone through some of these same experiences. And I knew them as very functional adults and parents and professionals, and it was like, oh wow, you went through this stuff too? And reading my book like really meant a lot to them. And so it felt like, and I'm closer to them. It's like brought me closer to some people in my life that that I've known for a long time, that I probably wouldn't have the deeper relationship that I have now with him. And that's been like a silver lining. I was just like terrified of all the bad things that were going to happen. I wasn't really thinking about the good things,
Right.
but it just felt like I need to do this. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a big why, right? Why do we do it? Is that
Yeah.
that reciprocity that happens, right? If we keep the stuff in the shadows, I mean, we're wired for connection. And if we keep the parts of us that are in pain in the shadows, they're not getting the light that we're wired for, which is body language and eye contact and care from those that love us. And then, if we begin modeling that, the change ripples out. How does this ultimately lead to systemic change? Hopefully over time, right? Josh, tell us more how you coped day to day with resourcing and recovery since the day hospital. What did any support you received or not look like at work and in your professional life?
Well, this was the first time I had really talked with people at work about some of the things I was going through. And interestingly, I work in behavioral health, and at that point, my boss was a psychiatrist when I took time off of work, and I had a conversation with him where HR said I didn't need to say anything, but I disclosed I'm struggling with depression, I'm going to a day hospital program. And he was super supportive, and I was really nervous about what impact it might have on my career. And in the long run, actually, I started feeling better, and I was doing better at work, and I got promoted, and people liked having me around, and some of my colleagues that I felt close to, I was able to share that with them as well, and I think it brought us a little closer together. That was part of my experience. But as far as the resourcing piece, I think it was a good reminder that I need to stay consistent with self-care around sleep and diet and exercise, and attending professional appointments, and trying to find that balance. And I'm the first to say that this year, I think it, for me, continued to be something that I struggled with because I was having some exciting professional opportunities and had been working a lot to create some things that I was really passionate about some really big mental health programs that we scaled across multiple states, and serving a lot of people during COVID. And so that was something I wanted to be working on, but
Right. On
but
the
also
front lines.
but also recognizing that if I'm not taking care of myself,
Right.
and I've got to pull out of the game, that doesn't help anybody.
Right.
And so that's where I'm really at right now, of a time where I'm really focused on taking care of my own health and my family, and getting really clear about where work fits into my life.
Right. Yeah, you said something earlier that was really powerful in regards to how the hustle is reinforced. Right, we're highly reinforced for responding to emails late at night and working really hard and performing all the time. And it's not to say that we can change, radically uplift like all of society and big business and capitalism, and we shouldn't work hard. It's just that beginning to notice when we need to slow down earlier, right? When we need to inhibit the desire for that reinforcement and be willing to step away. It's really hard. It's why a lot of times it's really hard to start a mindfulness practice, to start breathing and slowing down. There's an addictive quality to the hustle. And so not only your willingness to interrupt and go to the day hospital, but I imagine, and you've shared, and you just attended the retreat in Winthrop with me, is part of your practice now is inhibiting that hustle and that facade and saying, I need a vacation. Putting it in the calendar. I know for me, I'll start noticing, oh my goodness, my cadence, I haven't had a break for long enough. Or has anybody gone on vacation and like the first 3 days, they're just trying to relax. Just like, whoo, this is nice. And then by day 3, you're finally relaxed and you're like kind of starting to get ready to head back.
Yep.
And so it's this idea of let us not get to that point. So more mental health days. And when I was at the VA, I just would openly say, I'm taking a mental health day. I wasn't sick in the traditional sense of the word, but I was really needing to replenish and lay on my back for a long time. Yeah.
Well, and I think for me, like, I like the hustle, and I like working, and I like making things happen, and I'm learning to balance that with rest and joy. And my children are, my daughter Lucy is upstairs somewhere. She may be down later. She's wearing a little pink tutu with a kitty on it. She is just like one big happy moment after another. And so, having them in my life to remind me of what it is to be in the moment and to really experience that joy. And at our home, we call the weekends family days, and the girls get really excited about that. And I'm trying to make the most of that before they're teenagers when they may be less interested in family days. And so just making the most of, being intentional about what you're going to do with each day, and having rest built in and having work built in.
Right.
Because it is easy to think that just chilling out all the time at Margaritaville would be amazing, but I don't think that that's going to be satisfying for most of it. But it's got to be some balance.
Yeah. And balance is like riding a bicycle. You got to keep moving to keep it, right? I call boundaries and balance, I call them living documents. They're just living documents that constantly need tuning in and checking. Let's see, do you want to go? Yeah, you go.
So how do you recommend addressing mental health with children?
Beautiful question. That speaks to a lot of what I know you and I both love and care about, which is the pass down of generational trauma and generational mental health, right? And one way how to talk about it certainly is a really powerful way can be to model and share the ways in which you are coping. And so that can be in the present moment. Like for me, while I'm driving, if we're running late, I might just say, I'm noticing I'm becoming overwhelmed. I'm just gonna take big breaths. Mommy's gonna take really big breaths. Whoo! Sometimes I get a little silly with it. And you're just modeling for them. Or sometimes I'm like, I will raise my hand and be like, I need a break. And I sort of remove myself. Right, and so there's just this in vivo, in real life, present moment practice that you can model and share with them. And not only is that helpful for them to witness, it's good, it's also helpful because I get to practice, right? There's a motivation there for me to practice. So that's one way. And then as they get older, just really sharing with them any literature that you've found helpful. I'll never forget, and my Aunt Lolly is on live stream right now, but I'll never forget when she sent me a beautiful book, Codependency No More by Melody Beattie, when I was in my late teens. And I just savagely read that. And it's, I still work on the issues now. It's not a fix. It's just enlightenment, right? It's building awareness, education, normalizing, saying this being human is hard. It's beautiful and it's hard. And then metaphor is also really powerful. How about for you, Josh? I'm curious what you're.
Well, I love
doing
that.
It tonight. By the way.
Love that example of the car because I think my kids have learned not to repeat the words Dad sometimes says in the car. When we're in traffic and the other guys are, they're all idiots, right? And so that's definitely a great way to practice. I've come to really appreciate what's happening now in our schools. Like I've noticed in my kids' classrooms, like there's so much content about socio-emotional stuff on the walls and naming emotions and are you in the red zone or the green zone wonderful. And just helping kids to be able to check in about where they're at and observe and to be talking about it. I think it's really important and that's something that our kids bring home and we can have those conversations. And so am really grateful for any of you that are teachers out there that are doing this work with our kids, because we're certainly raising them not in isolation, though sometimes it feels like it when we're trying to get out the door in the morning, but there's a whole community around us raising our children, and I think that for me is the most important thing, especially when considering the genetics or epigenetics of mental illness, when I know that my children stand to inherit some potential triggers for mental health disorders, and how do we make sure that they have a lot of protective factors in addition to maybe some of those risk factors.
Right.
And I know a big piece of that is to have really solid, caring adults in their lives, and so they've got a good community, and they have grandparents in their lives, and aunts and uncles, and parents that are consistently there, and so those things make a huge difference. And I think I even just have to remind myself, just like being with my kids and like going to the store and just like talking to them. Like I had a day with my 4-year-old recently where she had like a day off before school started, and our other daughter had started school, and we called it Lucy Daddy Day, and she was really excited, and I was like thinking of all these things, and I felt like I had to like do some super dad stuff and like take her to a theme park or something, but she just like really wanted to go swimming and then go to the park that she wants to go to like every single day, and it was like, don't you want to do anything else? And I kept like, and then it was like, no, she really just wants to do this stuff, and my mind was kind of all over the place, and I remember I just kept saying, just come back to this moment with her. And pretty quickly, I was there, and we were co-regulating, and we just had a really chill day. It was great.
That's beautiful, and such a reminder that ultimately all any of us need is connection, right? And so even this practice tonight, receiving vulnerability, and so whether it's your friends or your kids or your partner or your loved one, a practice is to just be with, right, and connect, and make space for the sharing, right? We get so so easily hooked to the fix it or to the theme park. Let's go to a theme park. Let's do this. Or when really it's just making space and connecting for the shadows. So when the day is hard, not going right to fix it mode or problem solving with any loved ones in this inquiry, it's kids, but with any loved one, and making space for the day to be hard and not trying to solve that. That will really support and resource anyone.
And I think also as parents, this is really, really hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. And if you're asking questions like this, you're doing a really good job.
Yeah.
I just want to, there's something called good enough parenting I learned about in graduate school. I really like that concept.
Yeah.
And so there's so much to be said for just tuning in and hanging out and being present.
Lovely. So Josh, you talk a bit in the book about finding the right medication cocktail. Can you expand on that experience and your perspective as a professional on the unique fit that is for each individual? And what advice, this sort of connects to, what advice would you give to someone who is unsure about seeking a professional therapist?
Yeah, so on the medication piece, I mean, I'm not saying medications for everybody. In my work, I've talked to a lot of people that medication didn't work very well for, or they're not interested in trying it. And there's a lot of other things to be done as far as a variety of psychotherapies, though I know it can be hard to find a therapist. But sometimes when you have a more complex mental health situation going on, there can be a few medications involved, and that's where it's really important to work with somebody that's experienced, that's an expert in what you are going through. So starting with your primary care doctor, but also getting a referral to a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner who's really a specialist in this stuff, who is going to take the time to really understand, and who's seen a lot of people go through some of what you're going through and understands how the medications that they can prescribe would target certain symptoms. And and there's also some newer things coming out around psychedelics and other things that are being studied scientifically that I think have some promise, that I'm really curious about what that's going to look like down the road. I really feel like we're kind of in the dark ages of psychiatry
Yes.
and behavioral health.
Yes.
So much is kind of very well-educated guesses, but still kind of shooting in the dark. And so I'm really hopeful, especially if we're talking about this more, because this is an area of healthcare that's really been in the shadows for a very long time, and it's very underfunded, and it's very hard to navigate and get help. I think it's getting better, but a generation ago, you wouldn't tell your employer, "I'm not happy with our mental health benefits," because you didn't want your employer to know you needed them. And now this is a conversation. In my worked for a very large employer, and where people were very vocal and were able to get some improvements to those. And so I think, and the newer generation, millennials and Gen Z, are more comfortable talking about this stuff, and are also more like, why, are demanding things should be better, and are frankly a little confused as to why things are the way they are, and I don't blame them. And so it's a really interesting time to be working in mental health.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, we're on our way, right? We're all on our way, always have been. And I think you make a really good point, and I would just emphasize it, is to seek psychiatry, right? That primary care is a nice first stop and is likely who you have most contact with. And that's not their specialty, right? And so I think it's really important to, you find the cocktail with the individual that is specialized and an expert in that field, in that arena.
Yeah, and even to your point earlier about yoga, sometimes that it can be a cocktail of yoga and diet and bike rides. My buddies Mike and John are here, who I ride bikes with a lot. That's definitely a part of my self-care. That's got to be part of my routine. And my psychiatrist is really on me about, one day he was like, if I could just write you a prescription for riding your bike. And I really took that to heart. It was like, I take my medicine. This is part of my medicine.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes people just think doctors are all about the pills, but so often patients most consistently take the pills. But there are a lot of behavioral things that the doctors that I work with anyway are advocating, and are stellar clinicians above and beyond just the pharmacology.
Right. And I often, there's sort of the road of potentially, as you said, when there's more complex issues on board, that there might be a long-term element to psychiatry and psychotropics, but it also can serve as a bridge. Like I often think of it as a way to, if things are just too overwhelming, if the riptide is there, if the wind, if all of a sudden the moon, the wind, and the sun hit all at the same time, then that might be an experience where you need a little bridge that helps you down the beach. And then you can access and tune into your resources more. So you're more likely to go biking. You're more likely to be able to sit in yoga and not have the thoughts be racing, or depression be overwhelming. And so it's sort of a bridge, and then those practices return to being. So we really want to emphasize that nothing is a sort of life sentence, right? And that's that cyclical, rhythmic nature to life, right?
And one of the most likely side effects is that you'll feel better, and that you'll get back to doing the things that you want to do.
Right. Right.
I think they need to add that to those lists of side effects.
Totally.
So Ellen, how can we practice more self-compassion in our daily life?
Nice. Yeah, it's a practice. One just really concrete example would be to say you're going to, right? Start by saying, I'm going to do this, and possibly anchor it with some part of your day. Maybe it's every time you brush your teeth, every time you make your bed, when you're washing the dishes. It's just that piece of the day starts to become kind of hooked to just deeply being kind to yourself. So self-compassion, for anyone, that just for us to all be having a working definition, is just deeply treating yourself with kindness, especially when things are hard, So on that beach, it's really gently being like, it's okay that this is happening. This happens to everybody. And my feet are on the sand, and I am okay. You know, I can have hard days, and I am okay. And so self-compassion, just simply being kind to yourself, anchoring it with something, is a super useful tool. Also, just internal dialogue and breath. Just pairing those two together. So you can be driving, you can be walking the dog, you can be in between emailing, and you just stop. We've done it a couple times tonight, right? And you notice your breath. Physical touch is a really powerful practice. It releases oxytocin. So you can just like offer yourself a gentle touch. Maybe it's a hand to heart, hands to elbows. This gesture of offering yourself kindness, giving yourself a hug, or just a caring touch, it does elicit responses similar to receiving a hug. So I fairly frequently just kind of do this. You know, it helps. It makes me sort of feel grounded. It releases what's called oxytocin. And so just incorporating these accessible, right? We can all do that. Sometimes we might want to set an alarm on our phone. That can be really helpful. And when it dings, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. There's my kindness, daily dose, you know? So be playful with it. And yeah, those are some ways to just begin to incorporate it, really loose. How about, anything come up for you, Josh? That's how I practice.
Yeah, something that I've been trying to focus on more, especially in my work with healthcare professionals around burnout, is the practice of gratitude.
Yeah.
And taking time each day, especially when things can feel so overwhelming and like so much is wrong, and you just turn on the news or look at your phone and it's just like, wow, there's so many problems in the world, and there are a lot of people that even I thought were friends of mine that are thinking really, differently than I am, and that's really hard. And I think being able to just slow down and have some compassion for yourself and appreciate everything that you've come to experience as being really whole is really important.
Yeah. And not expecting things to be different than they are, right? So when things are hard, or when I'm running late, or when I forget to send an email, or when I drop a ball, because the ball's going to get dropped, or when I'm really stuck in a comparing mind, or othering, or not enough, to just really just remind yourself, I'm not alone, right? I'm human, right? This is a universal human experience, right? We all experience that things are hard, right? And really connecting to that common humanity, that's a big piece. That's a term from Kristen Neff, who's a specialist in self-compassion. Common humanity is this sense that we are all doing the best we can with what we've got. And that reminder just all the time, is really useful, because it's a lot, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot to be human. It's a lot to be human.
Yeah.
It's also really fun. What is the best way to be a helpful friend to someone who has experienced depression and or suicidal issues? Thank you.
I think the key thing is to be a helpful friend all the time. I mean, to, certainly have appropriate boundaries, but to, any of us this can happen to any of us. We're all temporarily abled, and whether that's mentally or physically. And so stay connected to the people in your life that you care about. And so that when they're not feeling so well, they're going to feel more comfortable talking with you. And And so when you are able to have that level of connection, or even if it's somebody you don't see all the time and you see them and just like, wow, they're not doing well, trying to bring it up in a way that's gentle and even in line with some of the maybe complaints that they're having. They may be talking about how their relationship or work or other things aren't going well, and it seems like there's something more going on, like depression or something like that, and being able to just gently help them maybe see that and say, hey, I'm concerned about you, and I'm totally here for you. I'm happy to talk, but I wonder if maybe talking to a professional might be helpful. It's been helpful to me in the past. I could help you think through what your options are. But again, I'm totally here for you as your friend if you need to talk, and just hear where somebody's at. And if you're concerned somebody's suicidal, ask them directly.
That's right.
And you're not going to put that idea in their head.
No.
And more often than not, people will say no, or they'll say, well, I've had some thoughts, but they're fleeting and it's not something I'm going to act on. But sometimes somebody might have a plan that they're planning on carrying out, and that's an opportunity to say, whoa, let's slow down here and talk about some other options. I'm here with you. I'm going to get you to a safe place. In my work, one of my colleagues teaches mental health first aid, which is like CPR or regular first aid for just lay people, like non-professionals, and it walks people through how to have those conversations, and that's, I think, a part of the literacy that our society really needs right now, to be able to have those conversations, because so many people are just really uncomfortable. I just don't know what to say. I don't want to say the wrong thing, like I don't want to offend them.
That's right.
And then you walk away feeling, well, I don't know, and that's then you might be telling a different story later and wished you had done something. So I think especially we as licensed mental health professionals, have a responsibility to be doing more education with the general public about how to talk about this stuff and how to get people the appropriate help and resources. And it's not just about calling the suicide hotline, though we did put that number out if people are feeling like that's a number they need to call. And certainly, but there's other resources as well, like talking to your primary care doctor or your therapist, or but certainly starting with family or friends that you feel close to. And that's where I think each of us knowing who our people are, who our tribe is, and being, if you want to be somebody that people can come to, be that person in good times and in hard times, because everybody's going to have tough stuff.
Beautiful. I think and this is a lovely note to end on, like that piece of how do we support each other. And one thing we noted tonight, and that I encourage you to pay attention to, is what is it like, for whoever wrote this question, and then in general, just when we're supporting others, what is it like for me to support them? What happens in my body, what happens in my mind, and when someone is in suffering. And when we ask ourselves that, we're inviting our own selves to check in on if there's judgment, if there's fear, if there's the desire to want to fix it. And we want to work through that and then approach the person just with that, as you're suggesting, non-judgmental. Are you struggling? Are things hard? And we're able to receive that, right? And so earlier we checked in on what is it like to be the recipient of vulnerability. It's not easy. And so that's something to practice too, is what happens for me when I want to support someone. Tune into that. And then therein lies, coupled with what you said, a really beautiful connection that you can have. So I wonder if, Josh, you'd be willing to end on a reading.
Yeah, so I'm going to do one last reading, and then please stick around. We've got some books and some beautiful shirts of Ellen's, and I'm hoping to connect with some of you, and we may have a special treat as well. So.
Yeah. We'd love to see you all. And then also just those on live stream. I've never done something like this. I guess we are talking also to live stream, sending lots of love to you.
I like the concept of workability. Does an action lead toward a fuller life or a smaller one? In my case, medication is not an avoidance of pain, but an acceptance of my mood disorder. Knowing the history of my biological father's undiagnosed and untreated manic depressive mind helps me to accept this as my fate. It helps me to feel less guilty. I've lately been referring to mental illness as something I inherited. It helps with the shame that if only I was stronger, I could overcome the symptoms on my own and I wouldn't have to see a psychiatrist or have to take medicine every day. Maybe I will shrug off the story of genetic predeterminism someday. Some scientists argue that we are not bound to the trauma and genetics of our ancestors and that our capacity to heal is far greater than the 20th century science that diagnosed me with a lifetime mood disorder. Ketamine, psilocybin, and MDMA are showing promise for treating mental health conditions. Maybe I'll try one of those treatments next, in the hopes that I won't have to take psychiatric medication every day for the rest of my time in this body. Maybe I will wake up one day and this will have all been a dream. This is my life. It is full of contradiction and grace. I am lucky to be alive. I will be down again and I will go back up. Maybe too far up. I'm learning to ride the waves. I know what works and what doesn't. I still have a few things to learn. I have good people to hold tight to when the waves overcome me. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. This is not the end. It is only the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, be well. We'll see you all out there.